Welcome. I'm Jeremy Selland, an intern with the World Policy Institute at Loyola Marymount University. Currently, I am in London on a Hansard Fellowship, where I'm taking two classes at the London School of Economics and an interning in the British House of Commons. As part of the ongoing WPI Talks interview series, I'm with the Honourable Graham Allen today, Member of Parliament for Nottingham North. Our topic, Brexit and beyond. Mr. Allen, welcome.
Hi, Jeremy, how are you?
Doing well.
I hope you've enjoyed your time as an intern in the House of Commons. It's been great having you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So starting off, it's been 6 months since the UK voted to leave the EU in what's been called Brexit. Immediately after this vote, there seemed to be some buyer's remorse. What do you think the current wisdom on Brexit is?
I think we need to take a pace back and just look at some of the context. And I think some of the context is about the threat to democracy globally. And I think we can't see what's happened in the UK without looking at what's happened, say, in the Philippines or more recently in the election in the United States, Donald Trump, but also, as we speak today, news of Mr. Renzi, the Italian Prime Minister, having to resign because he was attempting to use a referendum in order to get reform within the Italian political system. And again, what might be called unconventional or populist people winning in all those circumstances. And with 3 more elections to come in Europe next year, Netherlands, France, Italy, Germany, some elections. This is a very interesting time for political scientists, but a febrile and worrying time for political practitioners who believe in our Western version of liberal democracy. No one seems to be standing up for that. No one seems to be articulating it particularly well. And I think we have to view the vote to exit from the European Union by the United Kingdom in that context. So I think there's some very, very big issues which stand at the back of this. Also, I think another contextual issue is about the use of referendum anyway. Traditionally, they've been the tool of dictators. I think Mrs. Thatcher said that, or was it Winston Churchill? But some eminent big C conservative did say that. Very occasionally, in the most important discussions, for example, if you adopt a written constitution, I would argue it might be sensible in those circumstances. But it's almost a loss of faith by democratic politicians to forego their representative government capacity and sort of fob off a decision to a public vote. And the problem with a completely public vote is that very often people will make decisions and judgments on the immediate or on issues which are not related to the question on the referendum paper. And I think we've seen that in the UK. I think we've seen it in Italy. And I suspect this has been a lesson to people that you don't easily give away representative government power that's been accumulated with many, many years of struggle to a broader audience who may not have gone through that decision-making process, have the experience of deciding on things. So that's the context. In terms of is there buyer's remorse? I think there may be, but there's also a hardening of attitudes. One of the things where the exit vote sort of hardened off a view was that the Western democracies are ruled by an elite, not us, but them. And I think that's very evident that many, many people, certainly in my constituency as a Member of Parliament, nearly 70% of my people voted to exit. And I don't believe 70% of them had gone through the very complicated argument about our treaties with European countries and our trade deals and the nuances of migration and economic migration and immigration. I think they had probably made a decision on we don't like certain people we see in the street, or we just don't like people in Europe telling us what to do. And above all, we don't like the ruling classes, the political classes in the UK, assuming that we will just do what they wanted. The Prime Minister who called this referendum assumed, as I'm afraid did many of us, that the British people had been in the European Union for over 40 years and wouldn't leave, and this would kill off this issue. He used a referendum for party political management purposes, and it backfired on him because people used a rare opportunity to vote to settle many, many other scores.
Yeah.
So many of them may feel regret about that, but many may well say we succeeded and we gave the establishment a bloody nose.
This raises another question. With the British leaving the EU, do you see an avalanche of withdrawals as well?
I think someone like me initially thinks this is terrible and it's a misjudgment and it's taking us in the wrong direction. I think that is true, but I think also the second thought must then be, why did we get into a position where people felt this was a good thing to do? And I think we need to answer those questions that you are an elite. We elect you and then we never hear from you again. Or we elect you and you just go off and you meet your friends, whether it's in Washington or in Westminster in the House of Commons or wherever it may be in any of those countries. So we need to answer that. So in the European context, the European Union as an institution is not fit for purpose. Even those of us who defend it should admit that, and not many people do. Our best friends for the European project are its worst enemies. They want to keep it close. It's a very precious baby. We're not going to allow you to hold it. You might drop it. Instead of explaining why we're doing what we're doing in Europe, why it's important that nations come together, the lessons of the Second World War and the First World War, which a new generation are not really au fait with and not listening to. We need to re-win the arguments and move the European Union forward. And they're exactly the same arguments we should be making about our democracy. Our democracy in many places is not fit for purpose. We need to restore it and renovate it and reform it and make it relevant to people today. And in not doing that, we actually, as friends of democracy, are the people placing it under greatest threat, because by allowing it to continue to be weak, we enable those who are against our democracy to come into the political frame, argue against democracy itself in many cases. This is happening on this very day in our own Supreme Court in the United Kingdom. Many people are arguing in the court today that our Parliament shouldn't have a say in when the exit is triggered. That should just be a matter for government. Now, that's because they want to exit, and they probably will exit, but they are arguing an anti-democratic argument because they feel so strongly about their issue. They don't value the process, which has been hard won and hard fought for. So we need to reform and renovate our democracy and make it fit for purpose, and read across to exit from the European Union. The European Union and those who care about the project need to make it much more open, much more transparent, and involve people, particularly when explaining issues like economic migration, the taxation formulas that we have in there, the trade agreements that we have in there. If you don't explain those things, then other people can be prey to simple arguments, which are very often extremist arguments and populist arguments.
Are the British concerned that in leaving the EU, the US-British relationship might be stressed or strained? This has been described as a special relationship. Do you think that can withstand the pressures of this day and age?
Yes, but again, back to the democratic arguments, I'm afraid. Democracy is a minority sport. If you look back over the history of humankind, there's only been several hundred years where any nations have had anything which we might even approach as calling it as a democracy. So similarly, if you're looking after your democracy, which we have not been doing and show very little signs of doing, then I think the arguments again can be extended across not only to the European Union, but also to the special relationship with the United States. It needs work, it needs effort, it needs people to do it for the right reasons. It needs people to be talking about it, it needs people to be changing it so that it's fitting modern circumstances. And I think you saw, even with President Obama, a sort of distancing that he felt perhaps that the special relationship should not necessarily apply as strongly to a country that had imperial connotations, had an imperial past in the not too distant past, which I completely understand. So that question should have been addressed, that we are a different Britain, and that in those days, when the president was raising those issues, we were finding our feet in the European Union. Was it Acheson said Britain has lost an empire and not found a role? Well, we had found a role, but by not taking care of that role and making it relevant and modern, we've actually put it in jeopardy and are now quite likely to lose that role. And where do we go? What's our next? Are we somehow going to recapture a global trading nation with imperial pretensions? I don't think that's going to wash either. So really difficult right now, but I think, as with all these things, talking and communicating effectively, using the links of ethnicity, of defence, a common view on defence in the world. Traditionally, that has been something that we should have been using with America, that we haven't done. And now with a new president, might well, just on a whim, I'm afraid, feel that those links are less important. And then we've put at jeopardy another very, very important relationship in the world, without really having anything in its place. The fault for this, again, I repeat, lies with the political classes in all these countries, and in this case in particular in the United Kingdom, for not having the foresight to manage some of this change and to introduce institutional change that would keep the British people happy and content with a democracy, would enable the European project to be one which was valued by everyone, and also to maintain the special relationship and take it, transcend it to a better level and a different level. None of those things have been done, and they don't, sadly, at the moment, look like having anyone speaking up for those things. And unfortunately, that leads us to be prey to people who are on the far right or populist in attitude. And that means it's quite a pessimistic outlook for someone who has always seen democracy as a way of moving forward and always on an upward curve. I feel that this is a very, very interesting and dangerous moment in our politics.
Interesting. Finally, how do you see deprived communities, which overwhelmingly voted to leave the EU, communities like the one you represent, Nottingham North, how do you see them coping with this decision, financially, socially?
Well, sadly, they, like many of the people who voted for Mr. Trump, and may vote for right-wing candidates in France and elsewhere, Netherlands next year, many don't feel regret. Many relish the fact that they've been able to deliver a blow at the powers that be. And in a sense, it's part of the misjudgment, in my opinion, that they have made. But on the basis of what was in front of them, they made an honest decision, but the wrong decision. They will suffer the consequences, unfortunately. And I've spent my whole life trying to help people who've suffered the consequences of the neglect and being taken for granted by the political classes, and the political classes failing to get to grips with things like regeneration. Again, this is commonplace in America and the Rust Belt, but it's very evident in my own area. My father was a miner, my mother was a textile worker. Both of those things have disappeared from my constituency. We had the biggest bicycle factory in Europe, which provided jobs for people. My grandfather worked there. That is now in Shanghai. So I understand why these people feel emotionally what they feel and how they seek to express it and can't express it other than when a vote comes along.
Yeah.
And it happened to be a vote about the European Union, but they took that opportunity to make their views known. And I think we need to reconnect with those people. We need to actually have certainly a party of the centre-left, like my party, the Labour Party. We need to have a whole series of policy proposals which we put to people and get them to understand by constantly talking to and with people how these things will work. If you don't do that, then people become frightened, they become desperate, and they make the sort of decisions that they've made in the UK in recent months. So I think that's something, a very strong lesson for certainly political parties like my own, that just doing what we've done in the past isn't good enough.
Yeah.
It's not that the people have got it wrong, it's that we haven't listened and interacted and had that catharsis of exchange and discussion so that we can come forward with stuff which may well be local, giving more devolved power in the United Kingdom, for example, which is the most over-centralised democracy of any of the Western democracies, right up from the local to the national and United Kingdom federal level, also to the global level, of coming up with policies where we can work with like-minded countries to actually have proper regimes on trade and international taxation that can make globalism work for those people. All we get at the moment is the negatives, and no one has the confidence or the intellectual power to produce policies that will work locally, nationally, federally, and globally. We could do that, but at the moment we're paralysed in the headlights and frightened by events that are happening across the world, rather than doing what politicians should do, which is to seize the moment and think through serious policy alternatives rather than comment on the drift that we're undertaking at the moment. So that's the more optimistic side of me. There is a pessimistic snapshot of where our democracies are globally, but I think it's perfectly possible if we actually learn Democracy 101, or O level as we would say in this country, and some of our legislators and executives learn those lessons. It's actually perfectly possible to make all this work. Not making it work gives us an unthinkable future.
Interesting. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. It's been good talking to you as always, Jeremy, and I hope my friends in the States listen to some of this and interact with me, and I'll be very happy to discuss further by email any of the comments that I've made, and good luck to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you for watching.